Hey boys and girls, today we're going to read chapter 3 in The Borrowers. Here we go. Sighing, Arrietty put away her diary and went into the kitchen. She took the onion ring from Homily and slung it lightly around her shoulders while she foraged for a piece of razor blade. Really, Arrietty exclaimed Homily, not on your clean jersey. Do you want to smell like a bit bucket? Here, take a scissor. Arrietty stepped through the onion ring as though it were a child's hoop and began to chop it into segments. Your father's late, muttered Homily again, and it's my fault, as you might say. Oh dear, I wish I hadn't. Hadn't what? Asked Arrietty, her eyes watering. She sniffed loudly and longed to rub her nose on her sleeve. Homily pushed back a thin lock of hair with a worried hand. She stared at Arrietty absently. It's that teacup you broke, she said. But that was days ago, began Arrietty, blinking her eyelids, and she sniffed again. I know, it's not you, it's me. It's not the breaking that matters, it's what I said to your father. What did you say to him? Well, I just said, there's the rest of the service, I said, up there where it always was, in the corner cupboard in the schoolroom. I don't see anything bad in that, said Arrietty, as one by one she dropped the pieces of onion into the soup. But it's a high cupboard, exclaimed Homily. You have to get up there by the curtain. And your father, at his age? She sat down suddenly on a metal-topped champagne cork. Oh, Arrietty, I wish I'd never mentioned it. Don't worry, said Arrietty. Papa knows what he can do. She pulled a rubber scent bottle cork out of the hole in the hot water pipe and let a trickle of scalding drops fall into the tin lid of an aspirin bottle. She added cold and began to wash her hands. Maybe, said Homily, but I went on about it so. What's a teacup? Your Uncle Henry never drank a thing that wasn't out of a common acorn cup, and he's lived to a ripe old age and had the strength to emigrate. My mother's family never had anything but a little bone thimble, which they shared around. But it's when she had a teacup, if you see what I mean. Yes, Arrietty said, drying her hands on a roller towel made out of surgical bandage. If that's certain, cried Homily, he can't climb a curtain at his age, not by the baubles. With his pin he could, said Arrietty. His pin! I let him into that one too. Take a hat pin, I told him, and tie a bit of name tape to the head, and pull yourself upstairs. It was to borrow the emerald watch from her bedroom for me to time the cooking. Homily's voice began to tremble. Your mother's a wicked woman, Arrietty. Wicked and selfish, that's what she is. You know what? Exclaimed Arrietty suddenly. Homily brushed away a tear. No, she said wanly. What? I could climb a curtain. Homily rose up. Arrietty, you dare stand there in cold blood and say a thing like that? But I could borrow. I know I could. Oh, gasped Homily. Oh, you wicked heathen girl. How can you speak so? And she crumpled up again on the cork stool. So it's come to this, she said. Now, Mother, please, begged Arrietty. Now don't take on. But don't you see, Arrietty, gasped Homily. She stared down at the table at a loss for words, and then at last raised a haggard face. My poor child, she said, don't speak like that of borrowing. You don't know, and thank goodness you will never know. She dropped her voice to a fearful whisper. What it's like upstairs. Arrietty was silent. What is it like? She asked after a moment. Homily wiped her face on her apron and smoothed back her hair. Your Uncle Henry, she began, Eglatina's father, and then she paused. Listen, she said. What's that? Echoing on the wood was a faint vibration, the sound of a distant click. Your father, exclaimed Homily. Oh, look at me. Where's my comb? They had a comb, a little silver 18th century eyebrow comb from the cabinet in the drawing room upstairs. Homily ran it through her hair and rinsed her poor red eyes, and when Pod came in, she was smiling and smoothing down her apron. Chapter 4. Pod came in slowly, his sack on his back. He leaned his hat pin with his dangling name tape against the wall. On the middle of the kitchen table, he placed a doll's teacup. It was the size of a mixing bowl. Why, Pod, began Homily. Got the saucer, too, he said. He swung down the sack and untied the neck. Here you are. he said, drawing out the saucer. It matches it. He had a round, currant, bunny sort of face. Tonight it looked flabby. Oh, Pod, said Homily, you do look awful. Are you okay? Pod sat down. I'm fair enough, he said. You went up the curtain, said Homily. Oh, Pod, you shouldn't have. It's shaken you. Pod made a strange face. His eyes swiveled round toward Arrietty. Homily stared at him, her mouth open, and then she turned. Come along, Arrietty, she said briskly. You pop off to bed now like a good girl, and I'll bring you some supper. Oh, said Arrietty. Can't I see the rest of the borrowings? Your father's got nothing now, only food. Off you pop to bed. You've seen the cup and the saucer. Arrietty went into the sitting room to put away her diary and took some time fixing her candle on the upturned drawing pin, which served as a holder. Whatever are you doing? Grumbled Homily. Give it here. There, that's the way. Now off to bed and fold your clothes, mind. Good night, Papa, said Arrietty, kissing his flat white cheek. Careful of the light, he said, and watched her with his round eyes until she had closed the door. Now, Pod, said Homily, when they were all alone, tell me, what's the matter? Pod looked at her blankly. I've been seen, he said. Homily put out a groping hand for the edge of the table. He grasped it and lowered herself slowly to the stool. Oh, Pod, she said. There was a silence between them. Pod stared at Homily, and Homily stared at the table. After a while, she raised her white face. Badly? She asked. Pod moved restlessly. I don't know about badly. I've been seen. Ain't that bad enough? No one, said Homily slowly, hasn't never been seen since Uncle Hendry, and he was the first, they say, for 45 years. A thought struck her, and she gripped the table. It's no good, Pod. I won't emigrate. No one's asked you to, said Pod. To go and live like Hendry and Loopy in a badger set? The other side of the world, that's where they say it is, all among the earthworms. It's 2 fields away, above the spinney, said Pod. Here's the picture of, Arrietty kissing her dad goodnight. Nuts, that's what they eat, and berries. I wouldn't ever wonder if they don't eat mice. You've eaten mice yourself, Pod reminded her. All droughts and fresh air and the children growing up wild. Think of Arrietty, said Homily. Think of the way she's been brought up. An only child. She'd catch her death. It's different for Hendry. Why? Asked Pod. He's got 4. That's why, explained Homily. When you've got 4, they're brought up rough. But never mind that now. Who saw you? A boy, said Pod. A what? Exclaimed Homily, staring. A boy. Pod sketched out a rough shape in the air with his hands. You know, a boy. But there isn't, what sort of boy? I don't know what you mean, what sort of boy. A boy in a nightshirt. A boy. You know what a boy is, don't you? Well, yes, said Homily. I know what a boy is, but there hasn't been a boy, not in this house, these 20 years. Well, said Pod, there's one here now. Homily stared at him in silence, and Pod met her eyes. Where did he see you? Asked Homily at last. In the schoolroom. Oh, said Homily, when you was getting the teacup? Yes, said Pod. Haven't you got eyes? Asked Homily. Couldn't you have looked first? There's never nobody in the schoolroom. And what's more, he went on, there wasn't today. Then where was he? In bed in the night nursery, or whatever it's called. That's where he was, sitting up in bed with the doors open. Well, you could have looked in the nursery. How could I? Halfway up the curtain. Is that where you was? Yes. With the cup? Yes. I couldn't get up or down. Oh, Pod, wailed Homily, I should never have let you go, not at your age. Now look here, said Pod, don't mistake me. I got up all right. Got up like a bird, as you might say, bobbles or no bobbles. But, he leaned toward her, afterwards, with the cup in me hand, if you see what I mean, he picked it up off the table. You see, it's heavy-like. You can hold it by the handle, like this, but it drops or droops, as you might say. You should take a cup like this in your two hands, a bit of cheese off a shelf or an apple. Well, I drop that, give it a push, and it falls, and I climbs down in my own time and picks it up. But with a cup, you see what I mean? And coming down, you got to watch your feet. And as I say, some of the baubles was missing. You didn't know what you could hold on to, not safely. Oh, Pod, said Homily, her eyes full of tears. What did you do? Well, said Pod, sitting back again, he took the cup. What do you mean? Exclaimed Homily aghast. Pod avoided her eyes. Well, he's been sitting up in bed there watching me. I'd been on that curtain a good 10 minutes because the hall clock had just struck the quarter. But how do you mean he took the cup? Well, he got out of bed, and there he was standing looking up. I'll take the cup, he said. Gasped Homily, her eyes staring. And you give it to him? He took it, said Pod, ever so gentle, and then when I was down, he give it to me. Homily put her face in her hands. Now, don't take on, said Pod uneasily. He might have caught you, shuddered Homily in a stifled voice. Yes, said Pod, but he just give me the cup. Here you are, he said. Homily raised her face. What are we going to do, she asked. Pod sighed. Well, there isn't nothing we can do, except... Oh, no, exclaimed Homily. Not that, not emigrate, not that, Pod. Now I've got the house so nice and a clock and all. We could take the clock, said Pod. There's a picture of the boy helping him. And Arrietty, what about her? She's not like those cousins. She can read, Pod, and sew a treat. He don't know where we live, said Pod. But they look, exclaimed Homily. Remember, Hendreary, they got the cat and... Now, said Pod, don't bring up the past. But you've got to think of it. They got the cat and... Yes, said Pod, but Eglatina was different. How different? She was Arrietty's age. Well, they hadn't told her, you see. That's where they went wrong. They tried to make her believe that there wasn't nothing but under the floor. They never told her about Mrs. Driver or Crampfurl, least of all about the cats. There wasn't any cat, Homily pointed out, not till Hendreary was seen. Well, there was then, said Pod. You've got to tell them. That's what I say, or they try to find out for themselves. Pod, said Homily solemnly, we haven't told Arrietty. Oh, she knows, said Pod. He moved uncomfortably. She's got her grading. She doesn't know about Eglatina. She doesn't know about being seen. Well, said Pod, we'll tell her. We always said we would. There's no hurry. Homily stood up. Pod, she said, we're going to tell her now.